live in peace.
Democracy came late to Hong Kong. It's less than a year since the first free election was allowed by the British colonial power and Democrats swept decisively into government. For the people of Hong Kong, democracy is a novel and exhilarating experience, and already it's deeply treasured. Yet, in spite of tonight's brave hymn, democracy stands little chance of survival, because the people of Hong Kong face a challenge which no one in history has confronted before. The stroke of midnight will mark 1 year exactly until July the 1st, 1997, when Hong Kong, the ultimate symbol of freewheeling capitalism, is handed back to the rule of China, the world's largest communist state. Britain's 99-year lease is running out, and as midnight strikes, the final countdown will begin. China has already announced that the vibrant new legislature will be abolished at the moment of handover. It will be replaced, temporarily it said, by a council of pro-Beijing nomenclatura. Exactly 1 year from now, the ruling Democratic Party will be thrown out of power, along with its leader, Martin Lee.
As I stand up here this evening, I see the many candle lights burning. That gives me great hope and courage. The fire of democracy has been lit. It cannot be quenched by an iron fist.
It is 12 years since Premiers Margaret Thatcher and Zhao Ziyang jointly declared the broad conditions under which Hong Kong would revert to China. Yet many of the fundamental details remain unresolved, and the people of Hong Kong face yet another day of uncertainty. In Hong Kong, money is a religion, and the only natural resource is its instinct to make money. Britain had hoped to hang on to this, its last and most lucrative colony, by negotiating to stay on, not a shop owner, but a shop manager. It was, they argued, the British system that kept the money machine turning. Deng Xiaoping flatly rejected the notion. He promised, however, that under Chinese rule, the Hong Kong system would remain unchanged for 50 years, so the golden goose could keep on laying. All of which seemed to soothe the Hong Kong people until suddenly the countdown was upon them.
People are more intimidated now. At the moment, the mood is beginning to change. People are beginning to feel a little more apprehensive about what lies in store. It's just the sheer erosion of time. The awareness now that we have less than a year to go, the clock is ticking, that the days are going past. There have also been some developments on the political front which I think brought home a sense of reality to many people.
The battle is on for the hearts and minds of the people of Hong Kong. As a countermove to the Democrats' vigil, pro-Beijing parties stage a Get-to-Know China festival. The object is to explain Deng Xiaoping's special plan to integrate Hong Kong. It's known as One Country, Two Systems. Hong Kong is to become a special administrative region of China, uniquely authorized to remain capitalist. Hong Kong's been promised that its institutions will remain largely autonomous so long as they're conducted in a manner that's patriotic to the motherland.
China's intentions towards Hong Kong can be summarized in one word: control. In a way, it's a unique situation. Unique in this century, that you have 6 million of peace-loving people being handed over to a very repressive communist regime. And whereas in the rest of the world, you see countries going in the other direction, towards democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. We in Hong Kong are condemned to go the other way.
On the border between Hong Kong and China, another special ceremony has been arranged for Countdown Day, and Communist Party officials gather from around the region to offer words of hope and encouragement.
我衷心希望香港市民能夠以香港未來主人翁嘅姿態，發揮高度嘅責任感同埋使命感，通過各種形式同埋渠道，按照基本法以及全國人大有關決定嘅精神。
A special gift to the community, a clock counting down the seconds to handover, just in case it had slipped anybody's mind.
I think most people would love to see an end of colonial rule. I mean, that is something that we should celebrate. And after all, we are all decent, upstanding human beings. I mean, who wants to live in a colony? And but of course, our concern is that we will switch from a British colony to a Chinese colony. But there may be still a small number of people who don't want the British to go, but I think these are very small in numbers. And these people will probably go with the British anyway, because after the British are gone, they probably will not feel safe here.
In the early 1800s, the island of Hong Kong, fragrant harbour, was no more than a poverty-stricken outpost of a stagnating empire. China had chosen isolation rather than interaction with a modern world it regarded as barbarian. It failed to outmaneuver the most powerful empire the world had ever seen, Victoria's empire. Britain was addicted to China tea, importing 30 million tons a year, and to redress the trade balance, merchant venturers began shipping in opium from British India. It quickly became the world's most valuable commodity. Millions of Chinese were addicted, and when China declared the trade illegal, Britain sent troops and gunboats to the Pearl River, blasting the Chinese fleet from the water. Hong Kong was claimed in redress for the insult to Her Majesty, and under threat of massive British firepower, China conceded Hong Kong Island for all time. In 1841, the Union Jack was raised, and an elegant city sprang quickly up. With the giant Chinese market lying just across the bay, Hong Kong became a magnet for fortune hunters, and great family business empires were founded. Britain had its trading haven in the east and converted it into a little piece of England, transplanted to the South China Sea, complete with its gentlemen's clubs, its cricket and lawn bowling societies, tea parties and debutantes' balls, and the Hong Kong Jockey Club, one of the first great institutions to be founded and which flourishes to this day. Piece by piece, Britain added to its tiny acquisition on the rump of China. In 1898, in generous mood this time, it negotiated the lease of the new territories for a mere 99 years. For the Chinese, it was then that the real countdown to the recovery of Hong Kong began, because ultimately, the colony could not be sustained without its hinterland. For the next 40 years, Hong Kong ticked over, and then a new empire emerged in the east. The Japanese army, having already overrun much of China, launched its assault on Hong Kong in December 1941. The garrison defended fiercely but hopelessly against overwhelming odds. Churchill had decided the colony was of no strategic value and could spare no reinforcements, but nevertheless he ordered the defenders to fight to the last possible moment. The surrender came after only 1 week, and seeing no value whatsoever in Hong Kong, the Japanese allowed the city to fall into dereliction. When Britain bounced back, it was to everyone's surprise. Not because they quickly overcame Japanese resistance, but because they decided to return at all. The Allies had been pressurizing Britain to return Hong Kong to China. These were the dog days of the colonial era. Why not end an inglorious chapter, or at the very least start negotiating independence? But on August the 30th, 1945, the Union Jack was run up once more over the colony. But across the border, another historical process was unfolding, which would transform Hong Kong as never before. The 1949 victory of Mao Zedong's communist forces in the Chinese Civil War threw the colony into panic. Unbelievably, his tanks stopped short of the Hong Kong border. The remnants of the defeated nationalist army had already fled to Hong Kong, the only stable and secure asylum within reach. But now retribution and persecution swept China, and wave after wave of refugees headed south and east. In their millions they came to this tiny pocket of land of only 1,000 square kilometers.
The 50s and the 60s were the decades which really shaped Hong Kong. The refugees who came over from the mainland brought with them their wealth, they brought with them their skills, they brought with them what's called in Chinese the guangxi, it's connections, business connections. And they're the people who literally developed Hong Kong's economic muscle.
Sprawling shanty towns and boat villages were gradually replaced by giant housing projects. Just a few square meters per family, but everyone had a fresh start, every child in education. The refugees were to be the catalyst to a new and dynamic Hong Kong.
They set up sweatshops in their own homes. They had small factories making plastics in the new territories. They had developed shipping firms. I mean, it is a effort on an heroic scale, what they have achieved in Hong Kong, this generation of people.
Suddenly, there was an enormous pool of cheap labor. Most of the refugees were capitalists through to their very bones and would work around the clock to make business succeed.
The Chinese provided the energy, the Chinese provided the capital, the Chinese provided the skills, but I think certainly the British system provided the ground on which this seed, this entrepreneurial seed, could grow.
In a decade, Hong Kong was transformed from backwater to boomtown. It had always been dwarfed by the economic might of Shanghai, but when Mao sided with North Korea against the United Nations, China trade was embargoed. Shanghai declined, and Hong Kong quickly went through a metamorphosis to fill the vacuum. The era of Made in Hong Kong had begun. No longer just a warehouse and shipping point for mainland China, Hong Kong became a formidable manufacturing center. Plastic flowers, textiles, watches, transistor radios, toys, all found their way into homes around the world. The money generated was to turn Hong Kong into one of the world's great financial powerhouses. Today, Hong Kong, the chameleon, has changed its colors once again. Just as other Asian countries threatened to undercut Hong Kong, China came out of its shell. Riches flowed into the colony as Deng Xiaoping's economic reforms dragged China into the modern world, and Hong Kong became its leading transshipment point. A new breed of Hong Kong businessmen has emerged. David Chang has a foot in both East and West. Educated in Britain, epitome of the English gentleman, he's made his peace with Beijing and has plans to extend his chain of Chinese-made clothing stores to Europe.
Hong Kong is a fantastic place to do business in because there is maximum flexibility in the minds of all of us. It's this what I call the can-do attitude. That fits you perfectly.
Is it I shouldn't have a smaller size? I was worried about this a little bit.
But it's more comfortable.
Right.
Is that a medium?
It is, yeah.
Yes. But try a smaller one.
I will.
But,
I will indeed.
I think you look nice as too.
Thank you. Thank you
look
very
very
much.
comfortable.
Thank you.
It had a system of law that had evolved in Britain for several hundred years. And that stability, I think, managed to give time to the population to apply their minds to the business of making money. And that has managed to give Hong Kong the kind of energy and opportunities which many of us have seized and have made success of. Andrea, tell you about it. For those of us who live here, the transition is a fait accompli. I think we've felt that for the last 5 or 6 years. We have come to accept it. For those of you who live outside, is a different atmosphere. Is like most things that we read in the newspapers or watch on television about a foreign land. Usually it is exaggerated because you read about 1997, you have this concept of a capitalist city being turned over to a communist sovereignty. That in itself, I think, is dramatic enough. But when you come here, everything is fine, everything is calm. People are still investing more than ever before.
Today, David Tang is revealing his new collection to the world. A celebrity event, not just for Hong Kong's social elite, but China's too.
As a businessman, I like to see opportunities where I can not only establish a business, but to establish a business that has got growth potential. And I think that one of the greatest opportunities is selling things Chinese. After all, Hong Kong has become almost overnight quintessentially Chinese, and I have a store that sells Chinese things, and I think that those businesses could go and grow into the world because there is still an element of mysticism about China, certainly exoticism. So when I sell something, I want to make sure that it's 100% Chinese.
Like David Tang, all of Hong Kong's tycoons are putting their money on a stable handover. They're at the head of the queue as the world scrambles for a place on the golden escalator to the vast, unexploited market of mainland China. There's nothing left to gain from good old Britain, it's already history. It's Chineseness and Chinese connections that matter now.
Inevitably, with 1997, when sovereignty reverts to China, there is an acute sense of nationalism. There was an awkward sense of belonging. We Chinese having to cheer on the Union Jack, perhaps at the Olympics. Certainly today, it seems slightly awkward. It sounded awkward to have the Union Jack flying and with the British national anthem and a Chinese face. We now don't have that awkwardness when we revert ourselves to China, and therefore there is a much greater sense of identity, of being Chinese. China, of course, has had 50 years of communism, and Hong Kong has had 150 years of capitalism. So in a way, is theoretical that China doesn't understand Hong Kong. But it's not really true, because Deng Xiaoping, as we all know, instituted open policy. And indeed, Deng Xiaoping has said that to be rich is glorious, and it would be naive for anybody to think that China doesn't understand capitalism. 75,000 mainlanders come to Hong Kong every year. So that infiltration alone is going to educate the Chinese in the mainland very quickly.
Mainland movie star Gong Li has flown in to endorse the collection, and David Tang can have chosen no better symbol of the new and fashionable face of China. Stand by, world, China's coming, but it will not be the stereotype of China that we think we know.
There is absolutely no doubt that the initial conception of this 1997 transition, that somehow communism is going to invade capitalism, is wrong. That exactly the opposite has happened and is going to happen, namely capitalism infiltrating into communism.
There is no doubt that China is inheriting an economic jewel. Hong Kong's treasure chest, its financial reserves, are more than $60 billion in foreign exchange. Its 6 million people generate a domestic product equal to 20% of that created by China's 1.3 billion. But the balance is changing. Chinese businessmen have come to Hong Kong in their droves, investing billions and reaping the personal rewards. The boards of Hong Kong's great corporations are headed by Chinese. Even traditionally colonial powerhouses like the Cathay Pacific Airline are now Chinese-controlled.
We believe that the Chinese economy can only become more and more a part of the world economy. There is no chance of China moving back. Some of my friends in Hong Kong believe that the interaction between Hong Kong and the mainland in future will be to the effect that, China becoming more like Hong Kong than the other way around. Well, perhaps they are a bit too complacent.
Most believe that Beijing would be stupid to tamper with this well-oiled machine. But some say that handing this intricately balanced mechanism to Chinese bureaucrats is like giving a fine Swiss watch into the hands of a garage mechanic. Will Hong Kong be asset-stripped and favour given once more to Shanghai or other booming mainland cities? Will the virus of corruption spread from the mainland?
Another important factor is that in the past 10 years or so, many Chinese, very influential Chinese people have come to Hong Kong and established their business here in Hong Kong. They have very strong ties with high-ranking officials in China. And these people in Hong Kong, because they have now settled here, they understand what contributes to the success in Hong Kong, and they don't want things to change.
If China allows Hong Kong to become perverted with corruption, with cronyism, if Hong Kong's currency reserves are pillaged, if rule of law breaks down, if the freedom of expression exists in name only, these are very bad signals which China will be sending out to the rest of the world, and which, in effect, rather quickly will affect the flows of foreign capital into China, which are absolutely vital for maintaining the growth of the mainland economy.
The events at Tiananmen Square may have sent shockwaves around the world, but the psychological impact on the people of Hong Kong was profound, shaking all faith in the handover process and permanently implanting mistrust in the word and the intentions of the Beijing leadership. Communism was collapsing all over Eastern Europe. The Hong Kongese believed reform was inevitable inside China too, and hoped they'd be merging with a stable and civilized society.
The fears of the people of Hong Kong about their own futures were overshadowed today by the mourning for the Beijing dead. Many of these Hong Kong Chinese once fled from communism. Their earlier joy at possible political change over the border now turned to sorrow.
About 1 million people in Hong Kong demonstrated in the streets, in our very narrow streets, but in a completely peaceful and orderly manner. Everybody was shocked. Nobody could believe such a thing could happen to Hong Kong people. And why were they demonstrating? Essentially, in support of the student movement in Beijing, in Tiananmen Square. The people of Hong Kong wanted to support the students' fight for democracy for China, because we know that if China has democracy, Hong Kong will never be left out of it.
For a number of months, we simply did not know what to do. Well, we felt, despaired, disappointed with the government. But now looking back, after all these years, what I myself feared most, there would be a lapse into the sort of, what we call the dark age before the opening up. Fortunately, however, not even Tiananmen could change this trend that China seemed now determined to embark on.
Tiananmen also taught the people of Hong Kong another sharp lesson. The world deplored the massacre, but soon business with China was back to normal again and booming, and even Britain had made only token protests. The motive was self-evident.
Filthy lucre, money, China trade is too attractive. China, with the 1.2 billion people, that market, I shouldn't be condemning just the British government. What about the French government, the German government, the US government? They're all, Japanese government, they're all looking at that huge China trade pie. Everybody wanting a slightly larger piece than before. And China can just break this international agreement with Britain in any way she wants, and nobody will object.
10% of the population of Hong Kong, some 600,000 people, decided to up and leave. Those who went first were the professional classes, scientists, doctors, technicians. Many did return to Hong Kong, but with the insurance of a foreign passport in their back pocket. And then the British slammed shut the door in what the Hong Kongese believed was a final proof of sycophancy to Beijing. They announced that March the 30th, 1996 would be the final day for applications for travel documents called BNO passports. This was the only document which allowed exit from Hong Kong. 100,000 joined the queues, and it was all to be futile because China was soon to refuse to recognize the documents anyway.
Many people here are refugees, or the sons and daughters of refugees. These are people who have arrived in Hong Kong. Some of them have fled terrible persecution. They've crossed the mountain ranges at night with just a shirt on their backs and a suitcase in their hand. Now, why shouldn't these people be intimidated? Hong Kong is very largely a refugee community, or it has the mentality of a refugee community. And these are people who mentally have their bags packed and are ready to go at the signs of trouble.
When they went into the talks with the Chinese was, we are here to negotiate the future of these 5-6 million people. But let me tell you, we don't want them. Now let us talk about their future. Why do I say this? Because the British had passed a number of laws, the latest being the British Nationality Act of 1981, which said that all Hong Kong people are third-class citizens, British citizens, but third class, and have no right to live in the United Kingdom. They did that, they locked their door, and then they began the negotiations with the Chinese. The Chinese saw it very clearly. The Chinese know that these Hong Kong people are completely at Peking's mercy.
Meet the crack Chinese regiment which will replace the British garrison. The Hong Kong press were told the troops had been coached in pop songs and instructed not to spit in the streets. The show was ill-calculated to soothe the fluttering breast, but perhaps that wasn't the objective.
Something nearly as disastrous as Tiananmen, I think, would be very unlikely, at least in the foreseeable future, because the Chinese government has learned a lot from the incident. I don't think it is likely that the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, will be involved in a confrontation with street demonstrators in Hong Kong. I believe that the Chinese army in Hong Kong will maintain a very low profile. Well, I believe that they will be practically invisible in Hong Kong most of the time. What I can assure Hong Kong people and observers from outside is that China wants a stable and prosperous Hong Kong for her economic development. China wants a stable and prosperous Hong Kong to maintain peaceful relationship with other countries in Asia. Most important of all, China wants the Hong Kong example to have a positive effect on reunification with Taiwan, because that is the big thing. If Hong Kong succeeds, then it would be easier for China to convince Taiwanese people that they can reunite with the mainland in the same way. So China wants Hong Kong to succeed.
Press agency photographer Tommy Chang, like so many other Hong Kongese, has decided to opt for security. At the age of 50 years, he's uprooting to Canada and has already sent his children ahead.
My past experience, see the wars in Indochina, the Cultural Revolution in China, and June 4th, I was in Beijing, and I have a little bit afraid of communism. That is one of my reasons to leave my birthplace. And also one thing is I'm afraid to see another movement, to see the Chinese killing the Chinese. June 4th, it shocked everybody. People still think about that. You know, if something goes wrong, it might happen to us someday. I hope it's not happen. I hope it's not going to happen, but I'm looking for a safe place.
Journalists have found themselves in the front line of the transition. There have been clear warnings from Beijing. In future, critical reporting may be seen as a threat to state security. The once proudly free Hong Kong press has sudden and amazing enthusiasm for Beijing policies. A blacklist of undesirables is said to have been drawn up.
Blacklist is I have no officially informed that I'm a blacklisted. But every journalist working in China, we need to get the right accreditations. But if I just walk in there to do my job without any approval from the government, I'm against the law. If something happening, I'm going there to break the laws and get arrested. I'm not going to take the risk. Okay.
I've got a hair on it. I'm very scared.
After covering some movement inside China without their proof, I think a little bit scared.
Tommy's wife, Young Yi, is preparing her departure, saying farewell to the friends and family who've either decided or who have no choice but to stay. Since the countdown began, a sense of fatalism has taken over most Hong Kongese. They're increasingly confident that one flag will simply replace another, and by keeping their heads down and staying out of politics, life will be unchanged. Nevertheless, Young Yi and Tommy Chang stand by the decision to go.
It is sad. It is really sad. Hong Kong is a very nice place, actually. We got to face and have another new start in a new country, and we start all over again. And in here, we got married over 20 years, and we got to have another 20 years in Canada to work hard to get what I can have here at the moment. So that is quite a big challenge for both of us.
This is Young Yi's business, a neighbourhood photo shop. It's been sold up, and today she'll hand the keys to the new owners. A last photo for Tommy, who would stay on in Hong Kong until the last moment.
Well, my planning is I'm going to sell out all my properties in Hong Kong, get some money, buy a house there, and I try to work a few more months, try to save some more money to living in Canada. I got to stay here in Hong Kong about another 10 to 12 months alone.
Papa, Mama 啦，兄弟姊妹啦，好多人都會喺度。係我同個家姐喺嗰邊啫。
冷天衫有未啊？
有。
凍喎嗰邊有啊？
有。
就and actually all my 3 children in Canada now. And the first few months they feel lonely because they don't have friends at all. But after 6 months, they're beginning to learn something, going to church, and they see a little bit more and meet some friends. So it's quite okay now.
我覺得都唔係好捨得啦。但係咧又可以同翻啲細路一齊啦，又掛住佢哋咁啊，覺得都係要過去好啲啦。
She's very sad, when she's packing, but at the other side, that she can stay with the kids and take care of the kids there, and she feel she's doing the right things, staying with the kids rather stay with me in Hong Kong.
The British have done their bit. The last outpost of an empire that covered a quarter of the globe is about to disappear. They want to go out in style and with dignity, and they want to put on a show. This is the farewell open day at Stonecutters Island, main base of the Royal Navy's Hong Kong squadron. It's a chance to welcome the local Chinese, to show off a bit, and perhaps even make Hong Kong reflect on what it'll miss in the way of air-sea rescue and law and order patrols. Anyway, even to the most biased observer, as public relations exercises go, it's a lot more friendly than the People's Liberation Army displays of martial arts and firepower.
To be very honest, we won't miss the British. What will I miss about Hong Kong? Everything.
It's a beautiful island, and I will really miss it. I will be very sad.
Do you think you will come back to Hong Kong when you will be older?
No.
No?
Why not?
Why? Because China's coming over.
We do welcome the going back to our motherland, but On the other hand, we do have some suspicion about the communist government, especially after the June 4th coup.
Yes, if there's one word to sum up the Open Day, it's got to be nostalgia. But just how do you go about dismantling a colony? The Brits have the answer. Just sell it off. If you want to buy a warship, a field ambulance, a filing cabinet, or even a sailor's hat, this is the place to come. Everything's up for sale or auction. There's not much point in shipping it home. There's hardly an army or a navy left there to use it. Most of Britain's foreign-born servicemen are being paid off. Some feel great bitterness that Her Majesty's government has refused to give them the security of a British passport. But there's always the fun of the ritual send-off to look forward to.
It's time that the Brits should go. To a large degree, the British presence here is a shell. You have the trappings of the British presence in terms of it's the governor, and you still have the Royal Navy and the military garrison here. Even now they're being phased out and so on. I think what Britain will leave behind is a sense of fair play. I think it will leave behind a sense of justice, and I believe it will also leave behind something even more intangible, a sense of humour. These are the things I think which are far more likely to be remembered and far more likely to be treasured by the people of Hong Kong than the institutions which are, frankly, not destined for eternity.
Yes! Yes!
Even the world-renowned Gurkhas, part of Hong Kong's garrison since 1949, makes its final appearance.
This is a very sad moment for us. Now, this was our second squadron. We'll have only one squadron back in UK, and especially for this squadron, in Hong Kong, there will be no squadrons left. Some units have to completely disband, and it's a very sad moment to be disbanded. That's also a very sad thing to leave Hong Kong, because this is like our second home. Because this past 20 years, out of 20 years, I spent about 16 years in Hong Kong and only 4 years in other countries, UK and other places. And also, we are used to this country, the people, Chinese people, and place, everything. And most of us can speak a few Chinese as well, which would help us with other Chinese people. But now we are missing all those friends, which is a very sad moment.
It's said the Gurkhas are the best fighting men in the world. A handful will transfer to a sister regiment in the UK, but the rest are being pensioned off. Some will return to their mountain homeland of Nepal. The rest will try to find jobs as security guards in Hong Kong. More than anything, it's the disappearance of the smiling-eyed Gurkhas that truly marks the passing of an era. Hong Kong is abuzz with election fever. The man who will replace the last British governor and become the first local Chinese chief executive, boss of the new special administrative region of Hong Kong, is about to be announced. But this is an election with a difference, because everybody knows the winner in advance. How so? Because the selection has been made not by popular vote, but by a committee appointed by Beijing.
Good evening, I'm Melanie Sawyer. The headlines tonight. Shipping magnate Tung Chee-hwa has been chosen as the first chief executive of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. After the vote, Mr. Tung made a call for unity and urged the different political factions to cooperate to create a better future. While the selection process was underway in the convention centre, scuffles broke out between protesters and the police outside. The police arrested a group of 29 demonstrators, including several legislators, as they staged a roadside protest. Independent legislator and Frontier Party member Emily Lau was among those detained, along with fellow councillors Lee Chuk-yan and Andrew Chang.
I think many Hong Kong people feel completely resigned to the situation, that the chief executive will be appointed by Peking alone. We have no say. We feel very powerless, impotent, and we are very upset.
We wanted to protest against the undemocratic method of choosing the chief executive. And of course, people say, you have not protested for 150 odd years. You allowed the British to appoint a governor. Why are you protesting now? I said the logic's very simple. Now there is a deal between Britain and China, saying in 1997 we will have a high degree of autonomy. So we obviously expect to have the right to elect our chief executive. I'd much rather that you be more honest and say, come on. In the past, the British appointed. Now, we the Chinese appoint. At least that's more straightforward and honest. But they did not. So we've said, no way. We're going to demonstrate and to show our anger.
The defiance of that so recent candlelight vigil has dissipated. Protesters now number scores rather than thousands. And a new phenomenon. The Hong Kong police have taken to showing up in massive force.
The Democrats themselves knew that they would be marginalised, that you would get this polarisation of sentiment in Hong Kong. You would have allies and friends turning against them, and that they would really be made to feel political lepers in Hong Kong.
When I was arrested by the police during a demonstration, I got the foreign journalists calling me up, doing live interviews with me from the police station. Not a single local journalist bothered to call. That tells you, this is a sign of the times, how people telling themselves how to behave and just saying, this is what they want of us, so we will act accordingly. And I think that is fatal. That's why I think the people get the government they deserve. I will not say this about Poland or some countries where the people are very brave. But in our case, there's probably a lot of truth in it.
Hong Kong's democracy is a very young flower with very shallow roots, and people are afraid that what will happen here is that this very tender young plant is in effect being hauled out by the roots by Beijing, and that what is being imposed on Hong Kong is not a democratic or even an elected institution. It will be an imposed authority.
So it is Christmas, but this year the crowds are smaller, shoppers are spending less, and restaurants have fewer bookings. The unthinkable is happening, and Hong Kong's ever-upward graph of success is showing a dip. Some rationalise that poor Christmas business is part of a general recession. Others that Hong Kong people have made a conscious decision to keep their money in the bank. Everyone is asking the question, what will next Christmas be like? As ever, the expats threw themselves into the festivities. Hong Kong has the biggest St Andrews Society anywhere in the world. It was the Scots more than any other British group who built Hong Kong, and they're not going to let a little thing like the transition of power to a few communists dampen celebrations which have taken place here for 150 years or so. A visitor from space might conclude that there was an air of enforced, almost desperate jollity about New Year's Eve. Those who know the expat hangout of Lang Kwai Fong will tell you that it's like this every night. Nevertheless, at midnight, everyone's conscious that the one-year countdown is exactly halfway over.
One of the interesting things about this story as it unfolds is that here we are 6 months before from the great date, and nobody can say with certainty what's going to happen. You have any number of scenarios. There's a very interesting study which was released by the Baptist University of Hong Kong, in which they suggested that the greatest peril to Hong Kong could be on the very moment of the handover itself, in which you have a superheated political climate. Protests and some disturbances are inevitable, and the fear is that there could be a horrific overreaction by China, and that the police or the PLA could be called out.
The Hong Kong countdown is halfway over, and there are still too many unknowns about what life will be like under China. The next 6 months will provide some, but certainly not all the answers. The rest will be known only after the great handover ceremony has taken place.